The unmanned aerial vehicle, or rather drone industry, has grown exponentially in the last 2 years. And this is in part because drones are now a great deal smaller than the drone behind me. And this means that loads of people are now coming out with a great deal of different consumer and commercial applications for drones. However, the industry is still in its infancy. So are we regulating drones enough, or are we scuppering innovation? Government agencies, the police and enterprises gathered at the SkyTech 2015 drone conference to discuss how UAV regulations should evolve. And the consensus is that more regulation is needed to help the industry grow. One of the ideas being considered in the policing of civilian and commercial drone use is for a hardware chip in the UAV to be locked, so it can only be flown once a user has registered with the government.
The largest manufacturer of drone technology at the moment, especially on the consumer side, is DJI, who are based in China. How do you enforce the incorporation of a chip that regulates the use of that drone, where all the regulations across the world are very different, without putting an enforcement on that manufacturer? You can't. So trying to bring something into an import that might necessarily be out of your control is very difficult to do without lots of money and lots of stringent penalties against a manufacturer, which are they enforceable in another country to the country of manufacture. I think that's where they'll be a bit reticent to move things forward in that way.
Now you can theoretically go and buy what is called a drone in a hobby shop and do the same job. I would like to see every person who flies what is called a drone, and we need to be specific because drones and recreational vehicles are not the same thing necessarily. And this is where the doing a work bit of the job is important. But I would like to see anybody who's able to fly one of these things actually has a license to fly them. It's like driving a car. You don't go out on the road and drive a car without a license. Why should it be any different for these? One thing that this industry cannot afford is a catastrophic incident. And there have been enough incidents already of people flying these things as independents, without license, without having any real training, qualified, certified training to done. Those guys may be having fun with them, but when an incident happens, it'll put our industry as a commercial sector back 5-10 years, because we're still very much at the beginning stage, and we can't afford incidents of that kind done by people who are not licensed, or at least are not certified to do the flying.
But apart from licensing, many in the UK UAV industry are also calling for better public education about correct flying practices and the insurance and qualifications needed.
The best way to go forward is get all the stakeholders together, give more money to the regulators so that they can look at it more closely, develop systems that are robust enough to enforce as well as educate. Can you prove that it's safe to operate? Yes. Can you prove that your system's safe? Yes. And then we'll allow some flexibility in there. If you can't do that, if you have no understanding, then you're stuck with the regulations as they are. And therefore, if people are then breaking those regulations, then you hit them very heavily, then you enforce it as heavily as you can. Basically, you don't want to regulate little Johnny in his garden with his little toy helicopter, because he's not causing any danger to anyone around him. Over-enforcement is going to be a problem in that regard. Where it becomes a problem is whereby people are flying down the high street, whereby they're putting the public at risk. And what the CIA was saying, it was the police are becoming involved in that. Someone suggested that the police might not want to become involved, but there's already been the discussion, and the police are taking over enforcement of the current rules, whereby it puts the public at risk.
The basic message is that come and tell us what you've got, where you want to use it, and prove to us that it's safe enough to do it, or you're competent enough to operate it. Bearing in mind that drones are a very, very small part of the CAA. What you wouldn't want us to do is concentrate on drones to the detriment of the airliners, so there's a balancing act to be played throughout, I think. By the end of the year, we'll be trying to adjust the regulations slightly to make them more appropriate to what aviation regulation is required to. So really gear the aviation regulations at the risks to other aircraft. At the very small end, it's a cross-government issue. It's not just an aviation issue, or the Department for Transport. There's a lot of other activities involved, and a lot of other areas have got their pennyworth to put in.
It's clear that there's still quite a way to go in terms of regulating drones, and many parties have got something to say about the issue. So it looks like we're going to have to wait and see until the Civil Aviation Authority releases their list of streamlined drone regulations at the end of this year. Thank you for watching Tech Talk. For more tech news, log on to ibtimes.co.uk.